My name is Eric Kurschat. You know that part already. I spent 16 years in corporate human resources here in Chicago. I moved to Chicago after college, and I was renting a place with some friends from school, and I needed a job. And my mom reminded me that I needed a job if I needed to pay bills. So I got a temp job in human resources, which I honestly didn't know much about, even though I had been a psychology major in school. And so I started as a human resources assistant and stayed with that company for 16 years. Got promoted a number of times and really learned human resources. And so today I am still doing a lot in the human resources space in a couple of ways. One, I help companies bring teams together and help them communicate more effectively with one another, learn
Hmm.
how they prefer to communicate and how they do their best work in the workplace. And then I also bring HR professionals together for professional networking, encouraging them to learn from each other and to learn about what resources are available and be inspired to do work that they get excited about.
Hmm.
So those, I would say, much of my time is spent doing those things, primarily in the human resources space.
Wow, that's amazing. And what are some of the ways that you find it's people should learn, even if they don't look too much into maybe their profile or other people's personality traits? What do you think are some common ways that someone can more effectively communicate with someone?
That is a great question. Um, the easy way, of course, is to complete an assessment, and so I help a lot of companies do that. But people don't always have the opportunity to start with an assessment, and so
Sure.
I'm very big on um, being observant and being curious. Asking really good questions and not assuming that everybody that you meet sees the world the same way that you do. You may be, for example, somebody who um, is very motivated by people and their stories and relationships and the feelings and emotions behind your relationships with other people. But then your friend might not care so much about those things. Your friend might be more motivated by numbers and tasks and things that are a little bit more logical rather than focused on feelings and emotions. And so I think if we can become more observant and more intentional about how we are talking with other people, how we're communicating with and connecting with other people, we can pick up little clues based on the words that they use and how they use them to let us know, oh, this person thinks about life the same way that I do, or maybe they don't. And because they don't, they think about things a little bit differently. Maybe that's somebody really valuable for me to spend time with.
Mm. Wow, that's really important. And what is your assessment called?
So, what I use is called DISC.
Mm.
And DISC is one of the more popular assessments out there that companies and consultants are using to help teams communicate more effectively. Myers-Briggs is a really popular one that some people have heard of. Sometimes that's abbreviated as MBTI, but it's Myers-Briggs. Another one was called Strengths Finder, and now is called Clifton Strengths. That's another popular assessment, and predictive index is in the mix as well. And the one that I use called DISC um, is just another one in the mix to help establish a common language for how people learn about themselves and connect with others.
Yep, and DISC is DISC. But
Yeah, oh, look, you've either done your research or you already know about this.
yes, I am pretty familiar with DISC.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm a high DI, so my D is like 80, my I is like 60, and then my S and C are like both under 10. So it's a very
I love
extreme.
it. I
Yeah,
did not anticipate that we would be talking about disc, but that's
I love
fantastic.
DISC.
So,
Yeah.
you and I need to keep each other close by because I am a CS.
Mm.
And so, where I might get caught up in a decision, unable to
Hmm.
make a decision because I'm doing a little
Yes.
bit too much research and I want to have a system in place and I'm wanting to make sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, as they say. I would be able to lean on you because odds are you would be able to make a quicker decision than
Hmm.
I would. And that would be
Yeah.
really helpful to me.
Yeah, where I'm a high D, my mom and my brother are both S and C's,
Uh-huh.
and they take longer for decisions, and then I take faster. And so we always kind of have like this debate, like, okay, so where are we gonna go for dinner? And we're like, go? And I'm like, we'll just go here. And they're like, okay, that's good. And that's how a lot of conversations. So it's helpful for us on both sides to know, like, okay, I know my mom is going to take a few more minutes to decide. So it's better if we go earlier or if I give her more time to think. And she knows, oh, Muskan makes decisions a lot faster. So it's not as hard. If I have a question, she can answer it on the spot.
Well, that's a great example. And Muskan, think about it in terms of being in school and working together with your
Yeah.
friends on a project. If everybody brought the same strengths that you did to that project, you would excel in certain areas, but there would be certain areas where people are looking around for help, you know?
Yes.
And if you're able to surround yourself by people who bring diverse strengths to a
Yes.
school project, now suddenly you're turning in something that is far superior than it would have been otherwise because people are showing up who naturally are excited about different aspects of that project.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
so much about disc. Like my dad was always asking me as a kid. I grew up around disc my whole life. I've basically been aware of disc. And so my dad, like, he'd ask me when I hang out with my friends, he's like, okay, so where is your friend on the disc? And I'm like, oh, she's a high S. I know this because she told me she's slower with doing work. So I just know that she's like that. My other friend, she loves to talk. So I'll just let her talk because I know that's what she enjoys doing. She's a high I. She wants to be the
Yeah.
life of the party and I'll let her. And I can use that energy and then I match her energy, and then it builds the rapport so much faster.
I shouldn't have been surprised that you and I'd be talking about disc. I did know very well that that's something that your father does, and he and I use different versions of it. There are a number
Yes.
of different versions of disc out
Mm-hmm.
there, but ultimately we can sit down together and still talk about the same concepts. So I shouldn't have been surprised that you are so familiar with
It's
it.
okay. There's a few people I've talked to, and they're like, "Oh, you really know about disc?" I'm like, "Yeah, my dad does this. He talks about it.
Right.
He'll take up calls while we're in the car going to like an activity I do, and I just
Yeah.
overhear him talking to clients about disc. I'm like, "Oh, okay, this is fun to learn."
You may appreciate this. My wife at one point said, "Eric, I love disc. I love that you love disc, but you really need to find other friends who will talk to you about it." Because every conversation we had, I would bring back to disc somehow, and I think it got a little old for her. So I've made friends like your dad who I can talk about disc with.
I think disc is such a fun concept to talk about. I've never gone to college, so I don't have any degrees or anything, but I've always really liked psychology, how people are, how people act, and I think disc is a really easy way for me to learn about it, and I just think it's so much fun. My brother's 13, so he's learning a little bit about disc as he's growing up, and we were watching a movie, and then he just points to one of the characters, go, "Oh, she's a high I," and I'm like, "Yeah,
How
she
funny.
is, yeah."
I have a website, and one of the most popular pages by far, and I'm not sure how this happened, is the page that I have of celebrity disc styles. And so I have listed various, even if it's in The Simpsons or in Star Wars,
Yeah.
celebrities or fictitious characters that we all know. And then I have their disc styles listed. And I think it's something about the search engine and the algorithms and all of that, but I get more hits on that page than any other page of my website.
Well, yeah, it's a fun page. I think people like to see themselves in characters or celebrities. Like, oh, that person, like Luke Skywalker, is like this on the MBTI. I'm like
Yeah.
that. I know that was a huge thing me and my friends did back then. We'd always take our MBTI and then we'd look up, like, okay, which character are we related to, technically speaking, in that sense?
I feel like you and I could nerd out about this all morning.
Yes, probably. We kind of got a lot of topic, but this is so fun for me to talk about. So I really appreciate
Yeah,
it. Yeah. So,
good.
kind of going through what you've gone through and the experiences that you have, is there anything that you'd say to either your 17-year-old in the past or 17-year-olds in the future?
I think that's a great question. And, a lot of people, you and I had talked previously, and you hear this question being asked in various conversations. And a lot of folks go back and say, "Oh, I would say this, and I would have, taken myself off course, and, it would have been brilliant to know this at the time." And I struggle with that because things happen, as you and I have already talked about. Things do happen, oftentimes for a reason, or there's just no other way it could have happened, even if it wasn't ideal, given the circumstances. Things happen the way that they needed to. I, in thinking about this question, I think that I would return to who I was when I was a little bit younger. And even though I've always been fairly naturally introspective and thoughtful about just how I do things, I feel like at one point in my life, I was a little bit too focused on titles.
Hmm.
That, especially coming out of high school, going into college, and thinking about what was going to come after college, I would think, for example, I mean, this wasn't me, but somebody could say, well, I want to be an attorney, or I'm going to be an author, or I'm going to be a social worker. And, that title becomes really important. And maybe the company does as well. And I think these days, I spend a lot of time with adults and students alike thinking through I think it's a good goal to have to consider what title you may eventually want to have or what company you may eventually want to work for. But it can't be at the expense of understanding how you are wired and what strengths you would bring to that title or that company. So I might say, oh, I'd like to be an attorney. And that's a great goal to have. But what is it about me as a 17-year-old that would make me a good attorney? And even more important than that, sometimes I think, and it depends maybe on the family that you're growing up in, some families just want you to be a good attorney. And some families might say, well, I want you to be fulfilled in the work that you've chosen.
Hmm.
I want you just to be good at it, but I want it to be uniquely meaningful and rewarding to you. So, my advice would ultimately then be consider what you would ultimately like to do, but also consider why you want to do that. What is it
Hmm.
about how you are uniquely wired in your strengths and how you define meaningful work that makes that a good fit for you? And if you're not clear on that piece, maybe it's worth spending some time on that part of the puzzle.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important because I think a lot of people were kind of wired just, go to college and then you'll eventually figure it out. And then maybe sometimes you see someone maybe famous or you see something on TV or you just see someone successful and you go, I'll just do it because I see they're making money or they're doing it well. But sometimes you don't always take into account, like, oh, okay, what will I find joy? What will work best based on what I enjoy, what I do, what I know, what I think I can learn. And I think that's a really, really important step that I think maybe a lot of people are missing nowadays.
And I had a lot of friends, and I've known a number of people that grew up in families that say, well, I'm going to do what a parent did.
Sure.
Maybe because they told me I have to. You know, maybe
Yes.
they chose what college I'm going to because they're paying for it, and so I'm just going to sort of follow in their footsteps. And there's nothing wrong with that,
Sure.
especially if that's something that's attractive to you. But I think what that removes from the equation is the possibility that you may want to do something entirely different. You may have a passion for drawing or for art, other arts, or for example, I sing in a couple of classical choirs, and if I had parents, which I didn't, but if I had parents that were in human resources and expected me to go into human resources, and
Hmm.
instead I wanted to sing professionally, whether or not that was the smartest idea at the time, I just like to know that people at least know that about themselves so a conversation
Yes.
can be had. And sometimes
Definitely.
it's easier than others, but it's worth asking.
Definitely. And that's why we have our little guitars in the background.
Exactly right. Music has got to be in there somewhere.
Of course. Music lifts everyone.
Yeah.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing a few minutes with me. I really appreciate it. Is there any last thing you'd kind of like to throw out there before we wrap it up?
One thing that I often say at the end of conversations like this is quite often we default to treating others the way that we would want to be treated. You hear that a lot. That's what the
Yes.
golden rule says, and I think that
Yeah.
that's valuable. But you may have heard this growing up with your father along the way that someone along the way coined what's called the platinum rule, which says there's still value, of course, in treating others the way that you would want to, but consider treating other people the way that they would
Yeah,
want to be treated. And
exactly.
once you do that, you consider the value of treating others the way that they would want to be treated. I think that really fundamentally changes your relationships.
I agree, definitely. When I'm talking to people, I think that's really something that I've really started to pick up on as I get older and as I talk to people, because there are certain things that I like. So I like certain things, I like being communicated to in a certain way. I like when people are straight to the point, they're direct, they don't have any fluff, and I don't mind if it even comes across rude sometimes, as long as I just understand what's going on. But
Yeah.
someone like my mom, who's more slower paced, more just want to kind of have a conversation, want to build a relationship, she's not going to like that. So just because I like it and that's how I would want to be treated doesn't mean she does. So then it kind of hurts that relationship if that's how I expect. Oh yeah, I like it that way, so everyone must like it that way.
I saw a meme along the way, an image that said something like, I like chocolate, but when I'm going fishing, I don't fish using chocolate. I fish using worms because fish like worms.
Yes.
Something along those lines. It's
Yeah.
sort of it's a cheesy analogy, but it makes total sense. You have
Yes.
to talk with people and treat people in the way that they ultimately want to be treated, and using the words that are ultimately most meaningful to them. And it's not an easy thing to do, but once you figure that out, your relationships with your friends and your colleagues and your family members, they all get improved and become more fulfilling, I think, for everybody.
Yes, so true. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing a few minutes. Why don't you let people know where they can find you, either website, social media, if they want to like to connect with you, learn more about what you do.
Thank you. And I can honestly say this is one of the best conversations I've had, not only all week, but all month, and maybe all of 2021. So
That's so sweet. Thank you.
I wish you and I could continue on, but I know we have a time limit. So it's been a lot of fun. My company is called Harmony Insights, and so people can find me at harmonyinsights.com. The HR networking group that I run is called HR Hot Seat, and that's at hrhotseat.com. And I probably spend far too much time on LinkedIn, so I'm always there.
Awesome, great. And I'll definitely link all of those in the description so people can find it easier and connect with you easier because you're an awesome person to connect with. And I just think everyone should talk to you for a few minutes.
Man, you're the best, Muskan. I got to keep you around. You do wonders for my self-confidence.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, my dad said you saw you on my calendar. He's like, "Oh, that's an awesome person to talk to. You'll have so much fun." I'm like, "I know I will." So I'm really excited. I'm glad that you had as much fun as I did.
It's been wonderful to meet you. Have a fantastic weekend.